From the moment we are born, we experience the world through our own eyes. Every event, every person we meet, and every decision we make seems to be a part of our own story. In this narrative, we are the protagonists. We think everything revolves around us. But is this really true? If we take a moment to think about it, we realize that everyone feels exactly the same way. Just like you see yourself as the main character of your life, everyone else views themselves in the same light. In a way, everyone is the main character of their own story. So, what does this mean for our sense of importance? This concept is not new. Philosophers, psychologists, and even filmmakers have explored this idea throughout history. The idea that the world does not revolve around us has been challenged and questioned for centuries. But what does it mean to be the main character? Is it just a perspective, or is there a deeper truth to it? One philosopher who explored this idea deeply was Jean-Paul Sartre, a key figure in existential philosophy. Sartre believed that human beings are born without any inherent essence or predetermined purpose. Unlike religious or spiritual views that suggest a divine plan or destiny, existentialism tells us that we must create our own meaning in life. Sartre famously said, "Existence precedes essence." What he meant by this is that we are not born with a pre-written script for our lives. There is no grand cosmic story that tells us what we are supposed to do. Instead, we must define ourselves through our actions and choices. According to Sartre, you are the main character of your own story, but only if you choose to be. If you do not take responsibility for your own life, then you allow others or society to write your script for you. The freedom to create your own meaning is empowering, but also burdensome. This idea challenges us to reflect on how we live our lives. Are we actively writing our own story, or are we letting external forces dictate who we are and what we do? But what if Sartre is wrong? What if there is no grand story to begin with? Friedrich Nietzsche, another famous philosopher, introduced the idea of the death of God. Nietzsche believed that, in modern society, the traditional belief in God and a higher power had lost its significance. Without a divine purpose, life could seem meaningless. This leads to nihilism, the belief that life has no inherent meaning or value. In a world without meaning, does it even matter if you are the main character? If there is no ultimate purpose or cosmic plan, why should we place any significance on our role in the story of life? In his novel, The Brothers Karamazov, Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote, "If God does not exist, everything is permitted." If there is no greater purpose to life, then the concept of being the main character may lose its relevance. In a universe without meaning, does it even matter whether we view ourselves as central figures? Perhaps in the grand scheme of things, none of us are truly the main character. When we talk about being the main character, we often assume that there is a solid, unchanging self at the center of it all. But what if that self is just an illusion? David Hume, an 18th century philosopher, argued that the self is not a stable, permanent entity. Instead, he believed that what we call the self is just a bundle of changing experiences, thoughts, and perceptions. When you look inside yourself, Hume said, you don't find a consistent, unchanging self, only a collection of fleeting experiences. In this light, the idea of being the main character becomes even more complicated. If the self is just an illusion, then what does it even mean to be the protagonist of your own life? This idea is also explored in Buddhism, which teaches that the concept of a permanent, unchanging self is one of the root causes of suffering. In Buddhist philosophy, the self is seen as a process, something that arises and passes away, moment by moment. There is no permanent I to be the main character. What if everything you experience is just a simulation? This is the idea behind the simulation hypothesis, popularized by philosopher Nick Bostrom. He argues that, as technology advances, it's possible that future civilizations could create realistic simulations of reality. If that's true, we might all be living in one right now. In this scenario, your feelings of being the main character could just be part of a program designed by someone or something else. If you are living in a simulation, does it even matter whether you're the protagonist? After all, you may not even be real. This idea raises a fascinating question. If your life is a simulation, does it matter if you're the main character? If you're just a program, a set of data, then you might not be the main character at all. You could simply be an NPC, playing a role without knowing it. For example, think about movies like The Matrix, where the characters start to question whether the world they live in is real. The main character, Neo, struggles with his perception of reality and ultimately learns that the world is just a simulation. If our lives are like this, what does it mean to be the main character? Are we all just players in someone else's game? Buddhism offers a perspective that challenges the idea of being the main character. According to Buddhist teachings, the self is not a fixed entity. It is a constantly changing process. The belief in a permanent, unchanging self leads to attachment, desire, and suffering. In Buddhism, there is no central I to be the main character. Instead, life is seen as an interconnected flow of experiences. The idea of being the protagonist of your own story is considered a misunderstanding of reality. Everything is interconnected, and the self is not separate from the world. The Buddha taught that the key to freedom from suffering is to let go of the attachment to the self. By doing so, we can experience a deeper sense of peace and interconnectedness. From a psychological standpoint, the belief that we are the main character can sometimes become a main character complex. This refers to a tendency to view ourselves as the central figure in every situation, often at the expense of considering the experiences of others. It's a form of narcissism, where we place ourselves at the center of every narrative. The main character complex can lead to egocentric thinking, believing that everyone else's actions and thoughts are directly related to us. This is increasingly seen in modern society, especially with the rise of social media, where people curate their lives for public consumption. The need for validation and attention often fuels this sense of being the protagonist. While it's natural to see ourselves as the main character of our own lives, psychologists warn that an excessive focus on this role can lead to isolation and dissatisfaction. It's important to remember that everyone else has their own story too. For instance, if we look at social media influencers, they often present themselves as the stars of their own lives, constantly seeking validation through likes and comments. This creates a sense of being the main character, but it can also lead to a distorted sense of reality. In films and literature, the idea of the main character is often tied to the hero's journey, a narrative structure where the protagonist faces challenges, grows, and ultimately overcomes adversity. Many people view their own lives through this lens, imagining themselves as the hero of a grand adventure. Films like The Truman Show and Fight Club explore this concept in fascinating ways. In The Truman Show, Truman Burbank begins to realize that his entire life is a scripted reality, created for the entertainment of others. This mirrors the existential question we face. Are we truly in control of our own story, or are we simply playing a role that others have written for us? In Fight Club, the main character's journey is a battle against his own identity. As he discovers the truth about himself, he is forced to confront the reality of his life and the choices he's made. These films show us that the notion of being the main character can sometimes be more complicated than we expect. In the end, the question of whether you are the main character is both simple and deeply complex. From a philosophical standpoint, there are many answers. Whether you take Sartre's existential freedom, Nietzsche's nihilism, or Buddhism's view of selflessness, each perspective offers a different understanding of the role we play in our own lives. Ultimately, being the main character is not about viewing yourself as superior to others, but about taking responsibility for your own story. It's about choosing to actively shape your life instead of letting others decide who you are. The idea of the main character may just be a narrative we create to make sense of our existence. But in the end, it's your choice whether to play that role.